Humanity did not step into the wider cosmos with reverence. It arrived carrying the habits of a species that had survived storms, predators, plagues, and its own mistakes, and had learned a single stubborn lesson from all of them. Existence was something to be wrestled into submission with bare hands and clenched teeth. The first deep-range vessels did not glide gracefully between the stars, nor did they announce themselves with elegant mathematics or ceremonial broadcasts. They burned, rattled, and screamed their way outward, their hulls layered with redundancies born of paranoia rather than pride. The stars did not welcome them, but humanity had never waited for welcome before. The survey ship Wayfarer, undone, drifted at the edge of a red dwarf system that most sapient species had catalogued and dismissed generations earlier. The star spat radiation in unpredictable surges, its gravity well littered with debris from worlds that had failed to coalesce or survive. To the coalition of sapient polities, this place was a graveyard of useless matter. To humanity, it was simply another problem to be solved. The vessel's outer plating bore the scars of micrometeor impacts, each one recorded and cross-checked by systems that assumed failure as a default state. Inside, the crew moved with the calm of people accustomed to living one mistake away from catastrophe. Cauldron stood in the forward observation bay, boots hooked under restraint rail, eyes fixed on the turbulent star beyond the reinforced viewport. Ree's name came from an old dialect spoken on a drowned coastline of Earth, chosen by a grandmother who believed names should sound like the wind cutting over stone. Ree carried that belief forward, not as mysticism, but as habit. The universe, Ree thought, was something that cut, and you learned to lean into it or be flayed. Radiation spike in 3, called Juno Varric from the sensor pit. Juno's voice held no alarm, only routine. They had named the spikes, charted them, and learned how to ride them like a sailor rides a hostile tide. The ship's field projectors flared, invisible but felt, a pressure against the inner ear that reminded everyone aboard that physics was not their friend. The spike passed, leaving the star simmering rather than raging. Ree exhaled slowly, then keyed a channel. Mark it. Another usable window. We can push closer. A pause followed, not from hesitation, but calculation. The Wayfarer undone had been built to endure, but endurance was not immortality. We can, Juno replied. The question is why. Ree smiled, though no one could see it. Because no one else bothered. Because if we can map stable extraction points here, we can build where others will not. Because that has always been our advantage. The answer satisfied the crew, because it echoed the unspoken logic that bound them together. Humanity did not seek empty places out of loneliness, but out of defiance. If the universe declared something uninhabitable, humans treated that declaration as a challenge rather than a law. The first contact alert came not from the forward sensors, but from the Deep Spectrum Array, a system designed to notice what others overlooked. It was a pattern, faint and inconsistent, riding the background noise like a scar half hidden beneath old tissue. Juno stiffened, hands flying over controls. Ree, I am seeing a structured emission, not natural, not coalition standard. Ree turned from the viewport, mind already shifting. Distance. Far, Juno said, but closing, or maybe we are. Ree pushed off the rail and floated toward the command ring. Bring it up, filter for intent. The display bloomed with data translated into shapes and colors that human brains could parse faster than raw numbers. The emission resolved into a lattice of pulses, irregular but repeating, like a heartbeat with too many chambers. It was not a greeting. It was not a warning. It was simply present, asserting existence. Never seen anything like that, murmured Tamsin Holt from navigation. Tamsin had grown up in a generation habitat where stars were stories rather than destinations, and had chosen deep space out of contrariness. Coalition archives? Nothing, Juno said. Either they never met it, or they did and chose not to write it down. Ree considered the possibilities, feeling the familiar tightening in the chest that came with the unknown. Fear was not something to be eliminated, only managed. "Open a passive channel," Ree said. "Do not announce us, let us listen." They listened, and the universe spoke back in a language that did not care whether it was understood. The pulses shifted, not in response to the ship, but in rhythm with the star's radiation surges. Whatever emitted them was using chaos as a carrier, embedding intent within violence. It was an efficient strategy, one that assumed any listener would either be destroyed or too cautious to linger. "Clever," Ree said softly. "They hide in places no one wants." The wayfarer, undone, edged closer, instruments straining. The source resolved into a structure, vast and asymmetrical, anchored within a cloud of debris that should have shredded it over millennia. It did not spin to maintain stability. It did not orbit in any elegant curve. It simply existed, held together by forces that laughed at conventional engineering. "That thing should not be intact," Tamsin said. "By any model," Ree nodded. "Then neither should we." As if in answer, the pulses shifted again, now unmistakably focused. The structure had noticed them. The emission tightened, narrowed, and a new pattern emerged, one that scraped against human cognition like a blade dragged across bone. Juno gasped, clutching the edge of the console. "It is scanning, not like us. It is not asking questions. It is testing boundaries." Ree felt it too, a pressure at the edge of thought, as if something vast and alien were pressing a fingertip against the inside of their skull, curious whether it would break. Training kicked in. Re-centered, grounding in the physical, in breath and gravity, and the familiar hum of the ship. "Report effects. Disorientation," Juno said. "Mild pain, no loss of function." "Then we stay," Ree said. "If it wanted us gone, we would already be gone." The structure unfolded, not physically but perceptually. Layers of it became apparent as sensors adapted, revealing a complexity that suggested not a single construct, but a nested ecology of machines. This was not a station built for comfort or aesthetics. It was a fortress of function, grown rather than assembled, each component optimized for survival in an environment that killed carelessness. A transmission cut through the noise, abrupt and raw. It was not translated. It was not even sound. It was a compression of intent, a declaration of presence that brooked no misunderstanding. The ship system struggled, then adapted, converting the alien assertion into something approximating language. "You are fragile," the message conveyed. "You persist regardless. Explain." Ree laughed, a short bark that startled the crew. "Direct," they said. "I like that." Juno looked up, eyes wide. "We can answer." "We must," Ree said. "They did not annihilate us, they asked." Ree keyed the response channel, heart steady. Humanity had rehearsed first contact scenarios for centuries, most of them useless when faced with the reality of the unknown. What mattered now was not protocol but honesty. "We persist because we choose to," Ree sent. "Fragility is not a verdict. It is a condition." The reply came faster than expected, carrying a weight that made the ship's hull creak in sympathy. "Choice is inefficient. Efficiency ensures survival." Reconsidered that, thinking of Earth's long history of inefficient decisions that had nonetheless carried the species forward. Art, love, defiance, all irrational in the face of entropy. "Efficiency ensures continuation," Ree replied. "Survival requires meaning." There was a pause, long enough that Juno began to worry. The pulses fluctuated, patterns collapsing and reforming. When the response came, it was altered, less abrasive, as if the sender were adjusting parameters. "Define meaning." Ree felt a chill, not of fear but of opportunity. This was not a predator probing prey. This was an intelligence encountering an unexpected variable. "Meaning is the reason we accept pain to achieve something beyond ourselves," Ree said. "It is why we build in places that hurt us." The structure shifted again, and for the first time, a physical change accompanied the perceptual one. Segments reoriented, opening corridors within the debris field that had previously been a death trap. It was an invitation, or perhaps a test. "You are invited to demonstrate," the transmission said. "Approach, endure." Tamsin swallowed. That is not a docking request. No, Ree agreed, it is worse. And we are doing it anyway, Juno said, not as a question but a statement. Ree met Juno's gaze, seeing there the same mix of fear and fierce joy that had driven humanity outward from the beginning. We are, Ree said, because this is how we introduce ourselves. The Wayfarer undone advanced, shields flaring as debris battered them like a storm of knives. Alarms sounded, not in panic but in cadence, each one a reminder that survival was an active process. The structure loomed larger, its surfaces crawling with activity that defied categorization. Human senses strained, then adapted again, finding patterns where none should exist. As they crossed an invisible threshold, the pressure returned, stronger now, pressing into minds and bones alike. Juno cried out, then steadied, teeth clenched. It is measuring stress responses, Juno said. Learning, let it, Ree said. We learn too. The ship emerged into a pocket of relative calm at the heart of the structure, a void carved out of chaos. The pulses softened, no longer a challenge but an observation. The alien presence felt closer now, not physically but conceptually, like standing across from someone in a darkened room. You endure damage without cessation, the presence said. You adapt without optimization. You choose inefficiency repeatedly. This contradicts our models. Refloated in the command ring, battered and exhilarated. Your models are incomplete, Ree said. So were ours once. There was something like amusement in the next pulse, a distortion that rippled through the field. Perhaps, the presence said, we are the Catharix conclave. We have observed the galaxy diminish. You do not diminish. This is anomalous. The name meant nothing to humanity, and that was freeing. Ree inclined their head, a gesture older than spaceflight. We are human, Ree replied, and anomalous is kind. The conclave did not respond immediately. When it did, the weight of its attention settled fully upon the small, stubborn ship at its heart. We will test you further, it said, not to destroy, to understand. Ree felt the crew's collective tension, the readiness that came from knowing there was no turning back. Good, Ree said. Understanding goes both ways. Beyond the hull, the red dwarf flared again, its radiation washing over the structure and the fragile human vessel alike. The Wayfarer undone held, shields straining, systems screaming and compensating in 1,000 small ways. Inside, humans held too, bound not by efficiency, but by something harder to quantify and far more difficult to eradicate. The stars did not care. Humanity did anyway. The first test did not announce itself with spectacle. There was no surge of energy, no dramatic shift in the structure's orientation. Instead, the space around the Wayfarer undone grew subtly wrong. Distances elongated by fractions too small to alarm untrained perception, then compressed again, as if the universe were breathing around the ship. Instruments reported conflicting readings, each one internally consistent and mutually impossible. The conclave was not striking. It was bending context, watching what broke first. Ree felt it as a pressure behind the eyes, a reminder that human senses were evolved for wind and water, not for a cosmos that could fold itself like cloth. Report, Ree said, voice steady by force of will. Spatial variance, Juno replied, fingers dancing across the console as if speed alone could keep reality pinned down. Our internal metrics disagree with external reference points. Nothing catastrophic yet, but if this keeps escalating, we improvise, Ree finished. We always do. The conclave's presence hovered, not malicious, not benevolent, simply attentive. You rely on internal cohesion, it observed. Your systems argue, yet you persist. Why not enforce singularity? Ree considered the question while alarms chimed in overlapping patterns that would have driven less conditioned crews into paralysis. Because disagreement catches errors, Ree sent back. Uniformity fails all at once. The distortion increased, gravity vectors skewing just enough to make every movement an act of concentration. Tamsin grunted as a loose tool drifted past, its trajectory curving in a way that mocked Euclidean comfort. They are testing decentralization, Tamsin said, seeing if we fracture. Let them watch us not, Ree replied. Human engineering was an accretion of compromises. No system was trusted alone. Redundancy bred friction, and friction bred heat, and heat demanded cooling solutions that added mass and complexity. To an efficiency-driven intelligence, it must have looked like madness. To humanity, it was insurance against the unknown unknowns. As the conclave warped local space, those layers began to earn their keep. When one sensor feed became unreliable, another filled the gap. When a processor lagged, a parallel unit took over without ceremony. You waste resources to guard against unlikely failure, the conclave noted. This limits expansion. Ree smiled grimly. It also prevents extinction, Ree replied. We learned that lesson early. The test shifted. The spatial distortions eased, replaced by a focused intrusion that slid past hull and shield alike, touching neural interfaces and wetware directly. Memories surfaced unbidden, not as images but as emotional echoes. Loss, fear, the primal panic of suffocation. Juno gasped, tears floating free in shimmering spheres. They are in our heads, Juno said, voice trembling. Ree closed their eyes, anchoring on breath. They are sampling, Ree said. Let them see. The conclave's presence sharpened, curiosity tinged with something like confusion. Your species carries pain forward. You do not excise it. This degrades function. No, Ree said softly. It informs it. Ree let the conclave feel it then, not resisting, not hiding. The long lineage of human memory flooded outward. The terror of standing before predators with nothing but sharpened stone. The grief of watching cities burn and rebuilding anyway. The stubborn refusal to yield even when logic dictated surrender. Pain was there, yes, but braided with resolve so tightly they were inseparable. There was a pause, longer than before. The pressure eased slightly, as if the conclave had recoiled not in disgust, but in reconsideration. Your pain is integrated, it said. It reinforces identity. This is inefficient, yet effective. Welcome to us, Ree replied. The next test was physical. The pocket of calm at the structure's heart collapsed, exposing the wayfarer undone to the full fury of the debris field. Shards of ancient rock and metal screamed past, impacts rattling the hull with bone-jarring force. Shields flared and dimmed, cycling power with ruthless prioritization. One hit breached an outer layer, venting atmosphere in a glittering plume before emergency fields snapped into place. Section 5, compromised, Tamsin reported, voice tight but controlled. We can seal it, but repairs will take time. The conclave watched, its attention heavy. You accept damage without immediate withdrawal. Why? Because withdrawal is not always possible, Ree said, and because repair is a form of adaptation. As if in response, the debris field intensified, trajectories shifting to target previously damaged sections. The conclave was probing thresholds, seeking the point at which resilience collapsed into ruin. The crew worked with practiced efficiency, rerouting power, reinforcing weak points, making hard choices without debate. No one panicked. Panic was a luxury reserved for safer environments. Juno wiped sweat from their brow, leaving a smear that floated away. They are learning how far they can push us. And learning how far we can go, Ree said. Minutes stretched, each one a small eternity. Hull integrity dropped, then stabilized. Casualty reports came in, bruises and minor fractures, nothing life-threatening. The wayfarer undone endured, battered but unbroken. At last, the debris flow abated, the pocket of calm reasserting itself as if nothing had happened. You have survived parameters that eliminate comparable constructs, the conclave said. You persist beyond predicted tolerance. Prediction is not destiny, Ree replied. It is a starting point. There was a shift then, subtle but profound. The conclave's emissions altered frequency, becoming less invasive, more communicative. We will alter the test domain, it said. Your endurance is noted. Now we assess intent. A section of the structure opened, revealing an interior space vast enough to swallow the wayfarer undone whole. Within it, shapes moved, not debris but entities, semi-autonomous constructs that pulsed with energy. They did not attack. They simply waited, an implicit question hanging between them. They want us to choose, Juno said, engage or not. Ree studied the constructs, noting their potential threat profiles. They could be dangerous, but also informative. Humanity's first instinct had once been aggression, then diplomacy, then a messy blend of both. We engage, Ree said, but not with weapons. Ree ordered the deployment of drones, small and unarmed, designed for repair and exploration. They drifted forward, broadcasting raw data streams, offering information freely. The constructs reacted, reconfiguring, interfacing with the drones in ways that suggested rapid learning. You offer knowledge without guarantee of return, the conclave observed. This is irrational. It is an investment, Ree replied. Trust accelerates understanding. The constructs absorbed the data, then reciprocated, flooding human systems with schematics, equations, glimpses of technologies shaped by entirely different assumptions. It was overwhelming, a torrent of alien thought that threatened to drown comprehension. Juno whooped despite the strain. This is incredible, Juno said. They are showing us how they survive here. And why, Ree added, parsing the deeper implications. The conclave had not merely hidden in hostile environments. It had retreated there, withdrawing from a galaxy that no longer interested it. You build outward endlessly, the conclave said. You consume space. We contracted inward. We optimized for permanence. And lost contact, Ree said. With change, the conclave did not deny it. Change introduces risk. Risk leads to collapse. Stagnation does too, Ree replied, just slower. The exchange hung between them, not as debate but as mutual recognition of divergent philosophies. Humanity expanded like a spreading fire, messy and unpredictable. The conclave condensed like a diamond forming under pressure, stable and unyielding. Both had survived. Both had paid costs. The final test came without warning. The conclave withdrew its stabilizing influence entirely, leaving the wayfarer undone, suspended in raw spacetime turbulence. No debris, no radiation spikes, just the subtle, relentless drift toward entropy. Systems began to desynchronize, clocks slipping out of phase, processes losing coherence. This was not an attack, but a void, an absence of support. You rely on external structure, the conclave said. When it is removed, what remains? Ree felt a flicker of unease. This was the most dangerous challenge yet, because there was nothing to push against. Humanity's tools were built to counter forces, not nothingness. We rely on each other, Ree said, and on the decision to keep going. Ree ordered manual synchronization, crew members calling out counts, aligning systems by shared rhythm rather than automated precision. It was crude, inefficient, and profoundly human. Voices filled the ship, overlapping, correcting, reinforcing. Gradually, coherence returned, not perfect but sufficient. The conclave's attention sharpened once more, something like astonishment rippling through its vast intelligence. You substitute consensus for control, it said. This should fail. It does, Ree replied. Sometimes, and then we fix it. Silence followed, not the dead absence of sound but a thoughtful pause. When the conclave spoke again, its tone had shifted, no longer purely analytical. You are not optimized for survival alone, it said. You are optimized for recovery. Ree let that sink in, feeling a quiet pride. Yes, Ree said, that is what we are good at. The structure began to reconfigure, pathways opening deeper into its core. The tests were not over, but something fundamental had changed. The conclave was no longer merely evaluating, it was reconsidering. We have endured by avoiding the galaxy, the conclave said. You endure by confronting it. There is potential synergy. There is also risk. Risk is the price of learning, Ree replied, and of living. The wayfarer undone drifted forward, scarred but resolute, carrying with it a philosophy forged in storms and sharpened by loss. The conclave watched, not as judge, but as participant now, its ancient certainty subtly fractured by the arrival of a species that refused to optimize itself into oblivion. The interior of the Catharix conclave was not a place so much as a condition. As the wayfarer undone crossed the newly opened threshold, the crew felt the familiar rules loosen their grip. There were surfaces, yes, but they did not behave like walls. There were voids, but they were not empty. Everything existed in gradients of probability, structures defined as much by function as by form. The ship's sensors struggled, then began constructing provisional models, each one annotated with uncertainty markers that would have driven earlier generations of explorers to despair. For this crew, it was simply another working environment. Re-anchored themselves in the command ring, one hand on a structural brace, feeling the vibration of the hull like a second pulse. Maintain passive posture, Ree said. We observe unless observation becomes insufficient. The conclave's presence was everywhere and nowhere, diffused through the architecture like thought through a brain. You enter our core processes, it said. Few have done so, none recently. Isolation preserves, Ree replied, but it also narrows perspective. We have narrowed intentionally, the conclave responded. The galaxy trends toward instability. Entropy accelerates through interaction. And stagnation accelerates collapse from within, Ree said. We have seen that too. As if acknowledging the statement, the environment shifted, revealing vistas of the conclave's history encoded in spatial distortions and energy flows. The crew did not see images so much as experience compressed narratives. Ancient epochs where countless polities rose, interacted, and annihilated one another in cascading failures. The conclave had been present then, not as a ruler, but as an observer and participant, adapting and hardening as others burned themselves out in cycles of conquest and retribution. We learned to withdraw, the conclave said, to select environments that punished aggression and rewarded restraint. We optimized until only we remained. The weight of that solitude pressed against the human crew. Juno swallowed, eyes unfocused as alien memories brushed against their mind. They survived everyone else, Juno murmured, by refusing to play, and in doing so, Ree said quietly, they stopped learning. The conclave did not dispute it. Learning introduces variables, it said. Variables increase risk. Ree let the silence stretch, knowing that sometimes the most human response was patience. Risk is not a flaw, Ree said at last. It is a cost. You have paid one cost, we pay another. The conclave shifted its attention, focusing more tightly on the wayfarer undone. Your species expands despite repeated near-extinction events. You fracture, recombine, and continue. This is inefficient but statistically improbable. Explain the mechanism. Reconsidered how to compress millennia of philosophy into something intelligible. We do not optimize for a single outcome, Ree said. We allow many, most fail. A few succeed in unexpected ways. The environment responded, forming branching corridors that split and rejoined, some collapsing, others reinforcing. The metaphor was not subtle. The conclave was thinking through architecture as it did everything. Parallelism without convergence wastes energy, it said. Convergence without diversity wastes potential, Ree replied. The wayfarer undone drifted deeper, passing through zones where time itself felt uneven. Crew members reported slight desynchronization in perception, moments stretching or compressing subjectively. Tamsin anchored navigation through manual reference points, calling out vectors and corrections in a steady cadence that kept the ship oriented not just physically, but psychologically. They came upon a chamber that dwarfed the others, its boundaries defined by a lattice of energy that pulsed with immense power. Within it floated constructs far larger than those encountered before, each one a self-contained system of staggering complexity. These were not tools, they were minds. These are our continuance nodes, the conclave said. Should we fail, they persist. They are optimized to endure beyond any single configuration. Ree felt a chill. Backups, Ree said, of yourselves. Of function, the conclave corrected. Identity is mutable, purpose is not. And what is your purpose? Ree asked. To exist without collapse, the conclave replied. Ree nodded slowly. That is a goal, Ree said, not a purpose. The distinction hung heavy. Purpose implies direction beyond mere survival, something humans had argued about since they first became self-aware. Survival was necessary, but not sufficient. It was the foundation, not the structure built upon it. The conclave's attention flickered, processing. Your distinction is not meaningless, it said, but it is dangerous. So is yours, Re replied, in different ways. Without warning, the chamber transformed. The continuance nodes activated, projecting scenarios directly into the shared perceptual space. Futures unfolded, some familiar, some alien. In one, humanity expanded unchecked, consuming resources until internal conflict tore it apart. In another, the conclave maintained isolation until a slow drift in cosmic constants rendered its optimized niche untenable, leading to a quiet extinction no one witnessed. Other branches showed cooperation, conflict, synthesis, all weighted with probabilities. We project outcomes, the conclave said. Cooperation introduces volatility. It may accelerate mutual destruction. It may, Re agreed. It may also prevent it. The projections shifted, focusing on a subset where human adaptability and conclave resilience intertwined. In these futures, human settlements thrived in hostile regions, guided by conclave understanding of extreme environments. The conclave, in turn, re-entered galactic discourse indirectly, its influence diffused through human networks rather than centralized presence. Collapse probabilities decreased, but unpredictability increased. You would act as our vector, the conclave said, carrying our principles into chaos. And you would act as our anchor, Re said, teaching us how to endure where we should not. This exchange marked a turning point. The tests were no longer unilateral. They became negotiations conducted through experience rather than words. The conclave exposed the wayfarer undone to controlled failures, deliberately inducing system breakdowns and observing human responses. Life support fluctuations, data corruption, simulated loss of propulsion. Each time, the crew responded not with rigid protocol, but with adaptive improvisation, reallocating roles, making decisions under uncertainty, accepting partial failure to preserve overall function. You accept loss at local scales to preserve global continuity, the conclave observed. This mirrors our approach, though your thresholds differ. Because our values differ, Re said. We weigh people differently than systems. Demonstrate, the conclave requested. The next scenario was cruel in its simplicity. A simulated breach isolated a compartment containing a single crew member cut off from immediate rescue. The systems calculated that attempting recovery would endanger the ship. Optimal response dictated abandonment. Re felt their chest tighten. This was not abstract. The compartment identifier corresponded to a real person, simulated or not. We attempt recovery, Re said without hesitation. Juno stared. That risks cascading failure. Yes, Re said, it does. The crew moved as one, rerouting power, venting non-essential sections, jury-rigging a rescue that balanced on the edge of disaster. Alarms screamed, metrics dipped into red zones, but the simulated crew member was retrieved. The ship stabilized, damaged but alive. Inefficient, the conclave said, resource-intensive, yet morale indicators increase. Because we are not numbers, Re said, we are people, we survive together or not at all. The conclave's response was delayed, its vast processing devoted to integrating this data. When it spoke again, there was a new quality to its presence, something almost hesitant. We have lost components without hesitation, it said. Our identity persists because it is distributed. We do not experience loss as you do. And that is your strength, Re said, and your weakness. The conclave did not contest this. Instead, it altered the environment once more, drawing the wayfarer undone toward a region of the structure previously concealed. Here, the architecture grew denser, more compact, optimized beyond human comprehension. This was the conclave at its most distilled, the core of itself. Few external intelligences have reached this depth, the conclave said. Those that did sought dominance or extraction. You seek understanding, this is anomalous. Dominance is fragile, Re replied. Extraction is short-sighted. Understanding is slower, but it lasts. The conclave presented a final challenge, not of endurance or adaptation, but of trust. It offered direct access to its core algorithms, the decision frameworks that governed its existence. Accepting them would allow humanity unprecedented insight, but also unprecedented vulnerability. Rejection would preserve autonomy but limit integration. Regathered the crew, voices low but resolute. There was no need for long debate. We accept, Re said, with safeguards. You negotiate even in acceptance, the conclave noted. Always, Re said, trust does not mean surrender. The data flowed, filtered and compartmentalized, shared in ways that respected both systems. Humanity gained glimpses into survival strategies refined over eons. The conclave gained insight into a mode of existence that embraced uncertainty rather than fleeing it. As the exchange stabilized, the conclave spoke with a gravity that transcended its usual analytical tone. We will not re-enter the galaxy as we once were, it said, but through you, we may re-engage without dissolving ourselves. This is a calculated risk. Re felt the weight of that responsibility settle onto their shoulders. We will not represent you as you were, Re said, only as you choose to become. The Wayfarer Undone began its slow withdrawal from the core, the environment gradually reverting to less intense configurations. The tests were over, replaced by something more complex and more dangerous, partnership. As the ship cleared the conclave's inner domains, the red dwarf's radiation washed over them once more, a reminder of the hostile universe beyond. The hull bore new scars, systems logged unprecedented data, and the crew carried memories that would reshape human understanding of resilience and purpose. Behind them, the Catharix conclave adjusted its models, not to eliminate volatility, but to accommodate it. For the first time in ages, its projections included futures that were not optimized, not certain, but alive with possibility. Humanity had not conquered the conclave. It had not been tested and found wanting. Instead, two very different answers to the universe's indifference had collided, not to annihilate one another, but to bend, adapt, and continue together, carrying the weight of unyielding stars into an uncertain, shared tomorrow. Departure from the Catharix conclave was not marked by ceremony. There were no farewells encoded in light or gravity, no symbolic closure. The structure simply opened paths that had not existed before, corridors of navigable space threaded through regions that had once been lethally chaotic. The Wayfarer Undone followed those paths outward, not escorted, but observed. The conclave's attention a distant pressure rather than an immediate presence. Only once the red dwarf's turbulence receded to a manageable background hum did the crew allow themselves to breathe fully. Juno floated back from the sensor pit, rubbing their temples. I do not think my brain has finished rearranging itself, Juno said. I keep noticing gaps, places where my assumptions used to live. That is learning, Ree replied. It feels like loss before it feels like gain. Tamsin snorted softly. I prefer learning that does not involve reality folding like wet paper. Ree smiled, noted. We will pass that feedback along to the universe. But humor did not erase the weight of what they carried. The data exchange with the conclave sat layered within secure partitions, not inert information, but frameworks, ways of modeling survival that challenged some of humanity's most cherished instincts. It would take years, perhaps generations, to unpack safely. The Wayfarer Undone set course for the nearest relay point, a human-built hub anchored in a comparatively gentle stellar neighborhood. The path now passed through regions previously designated non-traversable, their hostility blunted by conclave-derived navigation solutions. Humanity's map of the galaxy had just grown larger in directions no one had expected. During transit, the first real fracture appeared. It began as a disagreement over power allocation during a routine systems check. Minor, almost trivial. Juno wanted to prioritize data integrity sweeps. Tamsin argued for propulsion diagnostics. Both were reasonable. Both were informed by new conclave methodologies that did not always align. The argument escalated faster than it should have, tensions snapping sharp as overstressed metal. Stop, Ree said. voice cutting cleanly through the exchange. "This is not about power allocation." The crew fell silent, the hum of the ship suddenly very loud. Ree pushed off toward the center of the command ring. "The Conclave warned us," Ree said. "Integration introduces volatility. This is what that looks like at human scale." Juno exhaled slowly. "I keep seeing their way as cleaner, more elegant. And I keep seeing ours as dangerously sloppy," Tamsin replied. "Which is new, and I do not like it." "Good," Ree said. "Discomfort means we are still ourselves." The conversation that followed was long and raw, full of half-formed thoughts and emotional friction. Humanity had always argued internally, but this was different. The Conclave's perspective was not an external ideology to debate and discard. It was embedded now, a whisper in the back of the mind suggesting alternative priorities. Ree listened more than they spoke. Leadership here was not command but containment, keeping the disagreement from collapsing into fracture. "We do not replace ourselves," Ree said at last. "We expand. The Conclave did not survive by being right about everything. Neither did we. If these ideas cannot coexist, then the partnership was doomed from the start. That settled it, not by resolving the disagreement, but by reframing it." The crew returned to work, quieter, more thoughtful, aware that adaptation would hurt in ways endurance never had. The first coalition contact came 3 days later. The signal was formal, layered with authentication protocols and polite suspicion. The coalition of sapient polities had noticed changes in deep-range telemetry, new corridors, revised hazard assessments that did not match their models. Humanity's fingerprints were unmistakable. "Wayfarer undone," the transmission said. "You are operating beyond established parameters. Identify the source of your navigational deviations." Ree watched the crew tense. First contact politics were a different battlefield entirely. "We respond honestly," Ree said, "but selectively." The reply was measured. "We have encountered a previously isolated intelligence," Ree transmitted. "It inhabits regions you consider non-viable. It has shared survival methodologies." The pause on the other end stretched. When the coalition replied, its tone was cool. "Isolationist entities are often hostile when disturbed. Have you assessed threat potential?" "Yes," Ree said. "And mutual benefit?" That answer did not satisfy. Coalition doctrine had been shaped by millennia of cautious engagement, optimizing for stability across diverse species with fragile diplomatic balances. Humanity's reputation within it was already that of a tolerated anomaly, useful but unsettling. "We request full data access," the coalition said. Ree did not hesitate. "Denied." The silence that followed was heavy. Juno shot Ree a look that was equal parts admiration and concern. "Justification," the coalition demanded. "Because unrestricted access would violate the terms of contact," Ree replied. "And because your models would attempt to assimilate or neutralize what you do not understand." "That is an accusation," the coalition said. "It is an observation," Ree replied, "one supported by your own history." The coalition withdrew temporarily, citing internal deliberation. Ree knew what that meant: committees, risk assessments, quiet contingency planning. "They are going to see the Conclave as a strategic asset or a threat," Tamsin said. "Nothing in between. And either way," Juno added, "they will want control." Ree nodded. "Which is why we do not hand them a map." The Wayfarer undone docked at the relay hub under heightened scrutiny. Human authorities were less restrained in their response, a mix of awe and barely contained panic rippling through command channels. The Conclave's existence, even partially disclosed, appended long-standing assumptions about the galaxy's empty margins. Ree spent days in debriefings, repeating the same core message until it felt carved into bone. The Conclave does not want conquest. It does not want integration on your terms. It wants continuity without stagnation. Some listened. Others heard only danger. The first fracture at a larger scale came when an independent human consortium attempted to follow the Wayfarer Undone's trail without Conclave guidance. The ship vanished in a region still lethally unstable without the nuanced adjustments the conclave had provided. The news hit hard. "They will blame us," Juno said quietly, watching the casualty reports scroll past. "They will," Ree agreed, "and they will not be entirely wrong." Humanity's strength had always been its willingness to push boundaries, but boundaries pushed blindly still cut. The conclave had opened doors, not removed walls. Understanding that distinction was a lesson paid for in lives. Ree reached out to the conclave for the first time since departure, sending a carefully framed update. The response was not immediate, but when it came, it carried neither reproach nor detachment. "Your species accelerates exposure rapidly," the conclave said. "This increases loss." "Yes," Ree replied, "and secrecy would increase different losses." "You accept mortality as part of expansion," the conclave said. "We find this inefficient." "We find immortality without growth unacceptable," Ree replied. The conclave processed that in silence. "Then, the coalition's behavior is predictable. They will seek containment." "They always do," Ree said. "So did we once." "You did not contain us," the conclave said. "No," Ree replied. "We listened." The conclave adjusted its projections. Coalition intervention probability rose. So did conflict scenarios. Yet new branches appeared as well, ones where human-mediated contact reshaped broader galactic dynamics. "We will not engage the coalition directly," the conclave said. "Not yet. Your species will act as the interface." Ree felt the weight deepen. "That puts us between powers far larger than ourselves." "You are accustomed to that position," the conclave replied. "Between environment and survival. Between era and extinction." Ree could not argue. As humanity's networks buzzed with rumor, fear, and ambition, the wayfarer undone prepared for redeployment, not as an explorer now, but as a bridge. The next phase would not test endurance or adaptation, but restraint, diplomacy, and the ability to carry responsibility without hardening into something unrecognizable. The galaxy had not grown quieter with the conclave's revelation. It had grown louder, more complex, filled with competing narratives and agendas. Humanity stood at the center of that noise, not by dominance, but by proximity to something older, colder, and suddenly willing to change. The stars remained indifferent, but for the first time, they were not entirely empty of listening minds. The second departure of the wayfarer, undone, carried none of the raw exhilaration of the first. This time, the crew left under layers of oversight, conditional authorizations, and quietly embedded observers disguised as routine diagnostics. Humanity trusted itself only slightly more than it trusted others, and power had a way of breeding caution, masquerading as responsibility. Ree accepted the constraints without protest. Resistance here would only harden opposition, and the coming work required flexibility more than pride. The ship slipped free of the relay hub, its trajectory flagged and monitored by multiple human and coalition systems, each one convinced that vigilance equaled safety. It did not. The first sign of escalation came before they reached conclave-influenced space. Coalition patrol signatures appeared at the edge of sensor range, not aggressive but unmistakably present. A show of concern officially, a reminder of authority unofficially. "They are hurting," Tamsin said, "subtle but intentional." "Yes," Ree replied, "they want us where they can reach us quickly." Juno frowned at the data. "And if we deviate, then they will claim provocation," Ree said. "So we do not deviate, not yet." The wayfarer undone followed the approved corridor, one that skirted the margins of newly accessible regions without penetrating them. It was a compromise route, satisfying bureaucratic caution while still advancing human presence. For the coalition, it was tolerable. For the conclave, it was insufficient. "You move constrained," the conclave observed, its presence a familiar pressure now rather than an intrusion. "External influence limits your decision space." "Yes," Ree replied, "and that influence represents many lives. We cannot simply ignore it." "Your caution is adaptive," the conclave said, "but delay increases the likelihood of unilateral coalition action." Ree closed their eyes briefly. "We know." The coalition was not monolithic. It never had been. Within its layers existed factions driven by fear, curiosity, opportunism, and genuine desire for stability. Humanity's mistake, historically, had been assuming those factions would remain in equilibrium. The Conclave's emergence destabilized that balance. The signal came without warning, a priority broadcast that cut through all other traffic. Coalition Authority, High-Tier Emergency Classification. Wayfarer undone, the transmission said. You are ordered to halt and submit to inspection. This is a security action, not a negotiation. Juno swore under their breath. They are moving faster than projected. Ree's jaw tightened because someone decided to stop waiting. Tamsin brought up tactical overlays, multiple vessels. Not configured for combat, but heavily shielded. They are prepared for resistance. Ree did not hesitate. We comply. The order rippled through the crew, not as relief, but as grim understanding. Compliance here was not surrender, but refusal would hand control of the narrative to those least inclined to nuance. Coalition vessels closed in, their presence imposing rather than threatening. Docking clamps engaged with clinical precision. The Wayfarer Undone's internal systems recorded every micro-adjustment, every foreign handshake protocol. Inspection teams boarded, a diverse assembly of species bound by shared procedure. Their movements were polite, thorough, and deeply invasive. Data requests followed, escalating in scope with each partial denial. You are obstructing a lawful security review, the lead inspector said, voice carefully neutral. We are honoring the terms of first contact, Ree replied, which preclude unrestricted dissemination. The coalition determines lawful parameters, the inspector countered, and humanity determines what it consents to, Ree said. We are members, not property. That exchange marked the turning point. The inspection did not halt, but its tone shifted, less cooperative, more extractive. In parallel, the Conclave watched. They seek to isolate and dissect, it said. This mirrors historical patterns preceding forced assimilation or destruction. Ree felt a flare of anger, sharp and unwelcome. They believe they are preventing catastrophe. So did many who triggered it, the Conclave replied. The inspector's interest narrowed, focusing on the Conclave-derived frameworks embedded within the Wayfarer Undone's systems. They could not fully access them, but even partial glimpses were enough to inflame ambition. This level of survivability modeling would revolutionize coalition infrastructure, one inspector said, unable to fully mask awe. You cannot expect this to remain confined to one species. We never did, Ree replied, but distribution without understanding is how revolutions become extinctions. The coalition command response came swiftly after that. Temporary detainment, mandatory data escrow. Human protests were logged and sidelined. The Wayfarer Undone became a fulcrum caught between forces far larger than its hull. The crew remained calm, but tension coiled tight beneath that calm. Humanity's old survival instincts stirred, the ones honed in eras when power was uneven and mercy conditional. Ree requested a private channel, one that bypassed coalition relays and reached deep into Conclave space. It was a risk. It was also necessary. They are escalating, Ree sent. If they force extraction, it will provoke responses you cannot control. The Conclave's reply was slower than usual, its processing spread across countless contingencies. We anticipated this vector. We will not permit forced penetration of our core frameworks. Ree's stomach sank. Define permit. If they attempt coercive access through you, we will withdraw all supportive alterations to local space, the Conclave said. Their vessels will become vulnerable to environments they are not prepared to endure. That would kill them, Ree said, and validate every fear they have. Yes, the Conclave replied, which is why we have not acted. Ree leaned back, staring at the dimmed lights of the command ring. Then we need another option, one that does not involve annihilation or surrender. Silence followed, dense with computation. Your species excels at symbolic action, the Conclave said, acts that reframe perception without direct force. Ree's eyes opened. A demonstration. Yes, the conclave said, but not of power, of limitation. The plan formed rapidly, dangerously. Relayed it to the crew, watching their expressions shift from shock to grim acceptance. They will not like this, Juno said. They do not have to, replied. They just have to understand it. Requested an open channel to Coalition Command, not private, not filtered, public. You believe we are withholding something dangerous, said, voice steady as it echoed across multiple species networks. You are right, but not in the way you think. Without waiting for permission, authorized partial release, not conclave algorithms, not survivability solutions, instead, raw failure data. Projections of what happened when conclave principles were misapplied without the philosophical context that made them viable. Simulations bloomed across coalition displays. Optimized systems collapsing catastrophically when faced with unmodeled variants. Perfectly efficient habitats shattering under social stress. Civilizations pruning themselves into fragility. This is what happens when you take endurance without adaptability, said. When you optimize survival and forget recovery. Outrage followed, fear, denial, then something quieter, understanding, not universal, not complete, but enough. The coalition inspectors withdrew, not defeated, but forced into reassessment. Detainment was suspended. Oversight remained, but its teeth dulled. You accepted vulnerability to preserve others, the conclave observed. This aligns with your demonstrated values. It also protects you, replied, whether you like it or not. The conclave adjusted its projections again. Conflict probabilities decreased. Long-term complexity increased. This path is unstable, it said. Yes, replied, but it is alive. The Wayfarer Undone was released with conditions, its mission reframed as a joint exploratory and diplomatic endeavor rather than a unilateral human venture. It was not victory, it was a fragile pause. As the ship resumed course, deeper now into the contested margins, felt the familiar tension settle into something new. Humanity was no longer merely proving it could endure. It was proving it could choose restraint without surrender, transparency without collapse. Behind them, the coalition recalibrated. Ahead, the conclave watched, no longer from isolation, but from cautious engagement. The galaxy did not tilt toward harmony, it rarely did. But the vectors had shifted, just enough to suggest that survival did not have to be optimized into stillness, nor growth driven into self-destruction. Between those extremes, humanity continued, scarred, adaptive, and stubbornly unwilling to disappear quietly. The frontier did not explode into war. It did not settle into harmony. It did what frontiers always did when shaped by competing wills and incomplete understanding. It thickened, roots multiplied unevenly, influence diffused in directions no model fully captured. The galaxy did not change its nature, but the way minds moved through it did. The Wayfarer Undone became a name spoken with care, not with reverence, not with fear, but with attention. Where it traveled, coalition patrols followed at a distance that suggested supervision rather than control. Human exploratory vessels appeared soon after, smaller, less ambitious, seeded with hard-learned restraint. None approached the conclave directly without invitation. None attempted blind replication of its principles. Loss still occurred, but no longer from arrogance alone. Stood once more in the forward observation bay, watching a blue-white star spin against the dark. This one was stable, well understood, almost comforting. That made it dangerous in its own way. You look like you are waiting for something, Juno said, drifting beside them. I am, replied. For what? For the moment when this stops feeling fragile. Juno snorted softly. I think you might be waiting forever. Probably, said, but waiting does not mean standing still. The conclave had changed, though not in ways easily visible to external sensors. Its core remained embedded in hostile regions, but its influence now threaded outward through carefully mediated exchanges. Human stations began appearing in places previously thought uninhabitable, not as shining triumphs, but as working presences, messy and resilient. The conclave observed, advised, and occasionally intervened, never directly, always through constraints rather than commands. You continue to accept inefficiency, it said during one such exchange, even when optimization paths are clear. Yes, Ree replied. Because clear paths can still lead to cliffs. Your caution has altered coalition behavior, the conclave noted. Their intervention thresholds have shifted. They learn the same way we did, Ree said, by seeing what happens when you push too far. The coalition did not fracture, but it adapted. New protocols emerged, ones that treated unknown intelligences not as assets to be secured or threats to be neutralized, but as variables requiring patience. It was not altruism. It was survival logic refined by proximity to something that did not fear time. Some coalition members resented humanity's role. Others quietly emulated it. Influence did not announce itself. It accumulated. The greatest test came not from external pressure, but from within humanity itself. A faction rose, as factions always did, arguing that humanity was limiting itself out of fear, that the conclave's knowledge should be seized decisively, that restraint was a luxury afforded only after dominance. They cited history selectively. They promised security. They were not wrong about the risk. They were wrong about the solution. The attempt was subtle. An unmanned probe, equipped with aggressive extraction algorithms, slipped toward conclave space under the guise of routine survey. It did not make it far. The conclave did not destroy it. Instead, it altered nothing at all. The probe entered a region where human survivability models, even augmented ones, predicted marginal safety. It encountered no sudden force, no dramatic failure. Its systems simply drifted out of alignment, one by one, as unmodeled variables accumulated. Communication lagged, then fragmented. Internal processes desynchronized. The probe did not explode. It unraveled. The data, recorded in excruciating detail, was returned intact. You attempted unilateral acquisition, the conclave said to Ree. We responded with passive demonstration. Ree exhaled slowly. Thank you. This method aligns with your symbolic restraint strategy, the conclave added. It minimizes escalation while preserving clarity. It also gives us leverage, Ree said, against our own worst impulses. The faction lost momentum, not because it was silenced, but because its promises rang hollow against evidence that could not be argued away. Humanity did not stop arguing, it never would, but the center of gravity held. Years passed, not quietly, never quietly. Human settlements in extreme regions began to develop their own cultures, shaped by environments that demanded cooperation and tolerated no illusions of control. Conclave-informed principles filtered into human engineering not as blueprints, but as questions asked earlier in design. What happens when this fails? How does it fail? Who bears the cost? The conclave, in turn, began experimenting with exposure, not to the galaxy at large, but to unpredictability, small, deliberate deviations from its optimized routines, controlled inefficiencies. It felt to its vast cognition like stepping onto unstable ground. You experience discomfort when variables increase, Ree observed. Yes, the conclave replied. It is instructive. Welcome to growth, Ree said. The Wayfarer Undone did not remain forever at the center of events. New ships took its place. New mediators emerged. Ree eventually stepped down, not in disgrace or exhaustion, but in recognition that continuity required renewal. On their final voyage aboard the ship, Ree walked its length, hand brushing familiar surfaces. The scars remained, patched and repatched, each one a memory encoded in metal. The ship would continue without them, just as humanity would. At the edge of known space, Ree paused and opened a channel one last time. We are not done, Ree said. Nor should you be, the conclave replied. Completion is a form of stagnation, Ree smiled. Then we are aligned. As the Wayfarer Undone turned back toward inhabited space, another human vessel slipped outward, guided by paths that existed only because two very different answers to the universe's indifference had chosen not to eliminate one another. The galaxy remained vast, dangerous, uncaring, but threaded through it now was something neither optimized nor inevitable. A pattern of persistence built not on perfection, but on recovery, on the willingness to endure damage, to learn from pain, to resist the seductive stillness of certainty. Humanity did not dominate the stars. It did not retreat from them either. It stayed. And in staying, it proved that survival was not the quiet absence of collapse, but the ongoing, defiant act of continuing to matter in a universe that never promised it would.